Daniel and Rebecca Whitmore were the couple everyone admired, until one quiet apology shattered the illusion and exposed a chilling secret that ended in murder. Daniel and Rebecca Whitmore were the kind of couple people envied. They had a beautiful home nestled in an affluent neighborhood of Raleigh, North Carolina. Their lawn was always manicured, their holiday decorations perfectly timed and tasteful, and their social media feeds were filled with smiles, vacations, and sweet captions about love and life. Friends and acquaintances thought they had it all: careers, a solid marriage, and that kind of effortless chemistry that many couples struggle to find. But like many polished surfaces, their life only looked perfect from a distance. Daniel, a 9-year-old architect, had built a respected reputation in his field. He worked long hours at a prominent firm, and his projects were frequently featured in design magazines. Rebecca, 36, was a self-made entrepreneur, running a successful online boutique that sold handcrafted home goods. Her business had grown quickly over the past few years, giving her a strong social media following and a modest bit of local fame. They both looked like high achievers, balancing love and success in equal measure. But people who were close to them had started to notice the cracks. Small things at first. Daniel seemed distracted during conversations, often glued to his phone. He no longer showed up at Rebecca's boutique openings or posted about her milestones. Rebecca, once bubbly and quick to laugh, had grown more distant. Her friends would ask how Daniel was, and she'd brush the question aside with vague smiles or quiet shrugs. Some assumed they were just growing apart, as many couples do after years together. No one suspected anything sinister. What no one saw was how far apart Daniel and Rebecca had truly grown. Their nights were mostly silent, spent on opposite ends of the house. Arguments had become more frequent but less explosive, more like cold wars than heated battles. Rebecca had quietly taken over the master bedroom, while Daniel preferred the downstairs guest room, claiming he worked late and didn't want to wake her. She stopped asking questions. He stopped giving answers. Daniel, unknown to almost everyone, had found comfort somewhere else. He had begun an affair nearly a year earlier with someone he met at a business event. It started small, with flirtation and stolen text messages, but it escalated quickly. The excitement of something new, combined with the collapse of his marriage, gave him a sense of escape. He told himself he deserved happiness, that Rebecca wouldn't care, that the marriage had been dead for a long time. Rebecca, meanwhile, suspected something was off. She noticed the late-night calls, the smell of unfamiliar perfume, the sudden secrecy with his phone. But she didn't confront him right away. Maybe it was denial. Maybe she hoped it would pass. Instead, she buried herself in work, focused on her brand, and tried to hold on to the image of the life they had built. But deep down, she knew something was coming. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was just how dark that something would be. Leah Morgan never set out to be part of someone else's story. At 29, she was focused on her career, working as a marketing analyst at a growing tech firm in Raleigh. She was smart, ambitious, and fiercely independent. Her friends described her as someone who knew what she wanted: stable love, a partner to build a life with, and eventually a family. So when she met Daniel Whitmore at a networking event hosted by a local business association, she was caught off guard by how quickly she was drawn to him. Daniel was older, confident, and carried himself with the ease of someone who had already figured life out. He spoke with authority but also knew how to listen, a trait Leah found rare and refreshing. He didn't mention a wife or even hint at being in a relationship. In fact, he talked like a man who was very much single. He spoke about architecture, his passion for design, and how he wanted to eventually open his own firm. He laughed easily. He asked about her goals, and he never once gave her a reason to doubt him. Their connection deepened quickly. What began as occasional texts turned into long, nightly conversations. Within weeks, they were meeting for dinners, taking weekend trips, and planning a future. Daniel told her he had been through a painful breakup and was just beginning to rebuild. Leah sympathized and didn't pry. She believed in giving people time to heal. All the signs pointed to a real relationship, one based on trust, or so she thought. Months passed, and Leah fell deeper. Daniel started making promises. He talked about moving in together, starting over somewhere quieter, maybe near the coast. He said he wanted to slow down from his demanding career and focus on what really mattered. Leah believed him. She envisioned a future with this man, a life where things made sense, where love was honest and mutual. It wasn't until she started noticing the inconsistencies that things began to unravel. He never answered calls after a certain hour. He was vague about where he lived, always insisting his current place was temporary. He never invited her over, claiming his home was under renovation. When she asked to meet his family or friends, there was always an excuse. His parents lived out of state. His friends were traveling. Work was too busy. Eventually, Leah's doubts grew louder than her affection. Late one night, after he cancelled their weekend plans last minute, she did something she never thought she'd do. She searched for him online. What she found hit her like a punch to the stomach. There were photos, family photos, Daniel smiling with a woman who was clearly his wife. Not ex-wife, not a former partner, current. They looked happy, like they had a full life together. Leah stared at the screen for hours, trying to make sense of it. She wasn't just heartbroken. She was angry, furious that she'd been lied to. But instead of walking away, she confronted him. And what happened next would shift everything in a direction none of them could have imagined. 2 weeks after Leah uncovered the truth, something unexpected happened. Rebecca Whitmore, the woman whose life had been quietly invaded, showed up at Leah Morgan's workplace. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. The office was busy with its usual buzz. Phones ringing, keyboards clacking, voices murmuring in cubicles. No one paid much attention to the woman who walked in, dressed simply in jeans and a coat, holding a small handbag, her expression calm but unreadable. Security footage later revealed how composed she looked. Rebecca walked up to the receptionist and asked for Leah by name. She didn't yell, she didn't cry. She just waited, standing silently in the lobby while employees walked past, unaware that anything out of the ordinary was happening. A few co-workers later said she looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept in days, but still carried herself with grace. When Leah was told she had a visitor, she assumed it was a delivery or maybe a client dropping by unannounced. The last person she expected to see was Rebecca. Her stomach dropped when she saw her standing there, waiting. Everything in her told her to run, to hide, to refuse the meeting. But curiosity, and maybe guilt, forced her feet to move forward. What followed stunned nearly everyone who heard about it later. There was no shouting, no scene, no confrontation. Rebecca simply apologized. Not for what Leah might have expected, but for what she had been dragged into. She told Leah that she had just recently found out about the affair. She had read the messages. She had seen the photos. She knew everything now. But instead of blame, she offered empathy. Rebecca said she understood. Daniel had lied. He had manipulated. He had created an illusion that hurt both of them. Leah stood frozen, barely able to process the moment. The guilt that had been simmering inside her for days boiled over. But Rebecca didn't ask for anything. Not an apology, not answers, not even an explanation. She only wanted to be honest, face to face. They spoke for less than 10 minutes. Afterward, Rebecca thanked Leah for her time and walked out. No tears, no threats, just quiet sadness. Leah was left shaken. She didn't return to her desk for nearly an hour. She sat in her car, replaying the encounter over and over again. She realized Rebecca wasn't weak or naive. She was strong in a way most people weren't. She had faced betrayal and heartbreak and chose not to meet it with rage but with dignity. But what no one could know, not Leah, not Rebecca, not anyone, was that this moment would mark a turning point. Rebecca had exposed the truth, but that truth had consequences. Because just 48 hours after that meeting, she would be found dead in her home. A woman who had confronted betrayal with grace, who had chosen to speak from the heart rather than from hurt, was silenced forever. And the man at the center of it all was about to be unmasked. On the evening of February 18th, emergency services received a frantic 911 call from Daniel Whitmore. His voice trembled as he told the dispatcher that he had come home and found his wife Rebecca unconscious at the bottom of their staircase. He claimed he didn't know what had happened, that maybe she had slipped and fallen. Paramedics arrived within minutes. The scene was quiet, eerie, almost too perfect. Rebecca was lying motionless, her head tilted awkwardly, a pool of blood forming beneath her. To the untrained eye, it looked like a household accident. The stairs were hardwood, polished and steep. A fall was certainly possible. But the paramedics noticed something that didn't quite sit right. Rebecca's injuries were inconsistent with a typical fall. There was bruising around her wrists and an unusual impact wound on the back of her skull, not the front or side, where most people land when tumbling forward. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives were called shortly after. While Daniel maintained the story of an accidental fall, something about his behavior raised questions. He wasn't asking many questions himself, and his emotions seemed forced, like someone trying to perform grief rather than feel it. He told police he had been out running errands and came home to find her like that. But when asked for receipts or proof of his whereabouts, he grew vague and defensive. Investigators began piecing together the last few days of Rebecca's life. They quickly uncovered the confrontation at Leah's office. Witnesses confirmed that Rebecca had been calm, composed, even respectful. They also discovered that Rebecca had told her sister about the affair shortly after meeting Leah, saying she planned to have a serious conversation with Daniel and figure out what came next. That conversation never happened. Detectives secured a warrant to search the Whitmore home. They discovered Rebecca's phone in a drawer, powered off. When they turned it on, it contained screenshots of texts between Daniel and Leah, private notes about her suspicions, and even a voice recording from the night before her death. In that recording, Rebecca calmly asked Daniel about his intentions. She expressed her pain but didn't accuse. Daniel's voice was flat, dismissive, and disturbingly cold. Digital forensics soon uncovered even more disturbing evidence. Daniel's computer search history included chilling entries like how to make a fall look real, stares, fatal injuries, and quiet ways to kill someone. These searches had been made days before Rebecca's death. Leah, when contacted by police, was visibly shaken. She had no idea things had escalated so far. She admitted to telling Daniel that she wouldn't continue the relationship unless he ended his marriage. She never asked for anything more. She certainly never expected anyone to die. As the evidence stacked up, Daniel's version of events crumbled. Security footage from a neighbor's camera showed that Daniel never left the house that evening. His timeline didn't match. His lies were unraveling. What first appeared to be a tragic accident was quickly becoming something much darker, a premeditated act of violence. And soon the mask Daniel had worn for so long would fall away completely. The trial of Daniel Whitmore began just 6 months after the death of his wife, and by that time the case had already become a media sensation. Local news stations covered every detail. True crime podcasts picked up the story, framing it as a tale of betrayal, arrogance, and control. In the courtroom, Daniel sat expressionless, dressed in neatly pressed suits, his eyes rarely meeting those of the people who had once trusted him. The prosecution wasted no time laying out their case. They described Daniel as a man who had grown tired of the responsibilities that came with marriage, a man who saw Rebecca not as a partner, but as an obstacle to the life he wanted with someone new. They argued that when Rebecca found out about the affair and handled it with quiet dignity, Daniel panicked. Her calm approach left him with no control, and that loss of power, more than anything else, pushed him toward murder. Key evidence became the backbone of the case. Forensic analysts testified that Rebecca's injuries did not match a fall down the stairs. Experts confirmed she had suffered blunt force trauma inconsistent with tumbling, and the bruising on her wrists suggested she had been grabbed or restrained before the final blow. Then came the digital trail, search histories, deleted messages, and the chilling list of queries Daniel had made in the days leading up to Rebecca's death. Phrases like "how to kill without leaving evidence" and "accidental death planning" made it impossible for the defense to argue coincidence. Perhaps the most powerful moment came when the prosecution played the voice recording Rebecca had made just 24 hours before her death. Her voice was soft, weary, but clear, asking Daniel what he planned to do about the situation. She spoke without anger, almost pleading for honesty. Daniel's responses, short and cold, revealed a man unwilling to face consequences. The courtroom was silent as the audio played. Rebecca's voice, now a ghost, spoke from beyond the grave, and her words hit harder than any witness could. Leah Morgan testified on the 4th day. Dressed simply and visibly emotional, she told the court how she had been deceived, how she had demanded the truth from Daniel and believed he had ended things with Rebecca. She explained that she never asked for anyone to be hurt, and she never imagined the situation would spiral so far out of control. Her testimony was filled with regret. The defense tried to argue that Daniel had panicked after an argument and hadn't planned the murder. But the premeditated nature of his actions, from the internet searches to the stage scene, made that argument difficult to believe. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. Daniel Whitmore was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no reaction as the verdict was read. No tears, no apologies. Rebecca's family, seated in the front row, held one another tightly. They left the courthouse that day not with closure, but with the knowledge that justice, in some form, had been served. And a quiet, graceful woman who tried to do the right thing in the face of betrayal would never be forgotten.